What's good, man? It's your big brother K-Rino. Um, a lot of people been kind of asking me questions here and there about the whole little Kanye thing, and I gotta address it because it relates directly to black people's history, and I don't want anybody who may be confused or may not have a full understanding of what's going on or may have taken the comments in a way that they shouldn't have been taken, or vice versa. So I have to address it. For those that might not know, Mr. Kanye West, he made a comment when he was being interviewed by TMZ where he said that 400 years of slavery was a choice for black people. I think the way he phrased it was, 400 years, that's a choice. In my opinion, implying that if you as a people subject yourself to being in a particular condition for that long, then you yourself have basically accepted that and chose that because you should have gotten yourself out of that situation. Now, a lot of people took offense to it. A lot of people agreed with it, the statement that is, and a war broke out because people picked sides based on who they felt was right, and other people would say, well, Kanye didn't mean it like that. That's not how he meant it. Well, maybe so, maybe not. But if he didn't mean it like that, he should have clarified it then, or he should have clarified it now. If he has clarified it or explained it in a different way, y'all let me know because I don't follow it like that. But I'm of the opinion that he spoke out of ignorance. I'm of the opinion that he may have spoke out of the need to seek shock value in order to promote and market himself, taking the point of view that controversy sells. If that is the case, then I can't respect an individual who takes that position because you do not create a marketing ploy at the expense of your people and in a situation to phrase something in a way that denigrates your ancestors and the struggle that black people went through during the transatlantic slave trade. So, to go deep into it, slavery was not a choice made by black people. Slavery was a choice made by slave masters who came to the shores of Africa and kidnapped black people forcibly and brought them over here and forced them to build this nation that we're sitting in right now, which is the United States of America. When you have individuals who are of one religion, one culture, they have their own names, they have their own language, and you are physically removed from that reality, and another reality, a false reality, is imposed upon you, as was the case in the transatlantic slave trade. That is not a choice. Hundreds of millions of black people died in what is called the Middle Passages, the trip from Africa to the West, which we're in right now. Many of those black men and women, rather than be a part of what was to come for their brothers and sisters who did make it over here. They jumped off the boat, committed suicide in other ways, and just decided to themselves that I'm not going to live that way. So people would say, well, that was a choice. Okay, cool. For the rest of us, there was a process that was carried out against it. And I'm educating y'all right now because these are things that everybody has to know. These are things that black people need to know. This is history that white people need to know. Chinese, Latino, whatever race, creed, nationality that you are, you need to know this history. Because I hear a lot of people speaking out about black history and they don't actually know the true history. But everything I'm saying can be looked up. I didn't make this up myself. I believe in the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and these are the things that he teaches us. A lot of documentation will say that the whole slave trade began in 1619, when in fact the transatlantic slave trade began in 1555, when John Hawkins came to Africa on a ship that he named Jesus and began bringing the first slaves over here. Why are these dates important? These dates are important because from 1555 to 1619, when you do the math, that's a 64-year period. What happened in that 64-year period? That was a stop-off point where the future slaves were totally, mentally, spiritually broken down and physically broken down as well. That time frame was used to break the slave and to make him adhere to all of the things that he would have to be subjected to once he reached this land. And this took place in the Caribbean and in other places. You can't just bring a free and independent person to a strange land and say, hey, go over there and do that. Go over there and pick that cotton. Go over there and build that place. No, because he knows who he is. So a process had to take place where those minds were broken. And many of them still were not broken when they made it over here. But that was the catalyst, where if you're a black person and your name is Jones, your name wasn't Jones when you were in Africa. If you're a black person in America now and you're speaking English like all of us are, you were not speaking English when you were in Africa. So all of these different things, your belief system, your spirituality, these things were taken from you, because when you take those things from a people, those things represent who that person is. So now we suffer from an identity crisis as black people because we do not know our own origins. So just as a pimp, when you bring it to the modern times and you got the pimp and the prostitute, the pimp does not care about the prostitute's body other than the fact that he sizes her up and says, okay, you know what? She looks good enough to attract, so we can get this money. Once he gets outside of that thought, his focus is on getting her mind. He wants the mind of the prostitute because he wants to have control over her actions even when he's not around. So the pimp can be on Jupiter and the prostitute can be in Houston, and she's going to do exactly what he's instructed her to do, even though she may have the physical power to just totally leave. This is what happened in slavery. When we are conditioned over a period of time to carry out the tasks of the slave masters who enslaved black people, even when that slave master is away, we still carry out those tasks. So once that process takes place, then it's not a choice. You operating on autopilot. You are operating on remote, because the first wave of slaves that came over, they knew exactly who they were. They spoke their languages. They sung songs in their languages. They communicated in those ways. And the slave master would get upset, but in a lot of cases, he didn't even know what was going on, because he just thought they were out in the field singing, but they were really communicating. But as those generations passed on and new babies were being born, picture yourself as a man and a woman having a child, and the woman gives birth to a child, and the second that that child comes out of the womb, he's taken or she's taken and sold to another slave master in a whole nother state. Now that baby, who never knows his birth parents, can be raised up to think however that slave master wants them to think. These are facts. So before you get to hollering about it's not about racism. No, these are facts. These things actually happen. To place a man or a woman on an auction block and sell them. Your 10-year-old child, nope, it's not your child. We just sold him. We just sold her. Oh, she'll make a good maid, or he'll be great in the fields. Doesn't matter if this is your family member. Willie Lynch is real. Look it up. I ain't got time to go into it and explain it. So with to tie this into the whole Kanye thing, when you say slavery was a choice, you are not factoring in the mental conditioning process that took place in order to create the slave, in order to make the slave. Because once the slave is made and that mind is built, then he's just operating, he's just functioning, doing the bidding of the slave master. This is how it works. So he's speaking out of ignorance on two fronts. Because one form of ignorance is I just don't know. So if you don't know, okay, we'll give you that. But also ignorance is just being a straight up fool, because you have another agenda. And if you're operating on that level of ignorance, like we say, like black folks, we say you being ignorant, then we have a problem with you. So, yeah, Kanye is losing a lot of love right now. He's losing a lot of fans, because you can't make a statement like that in this day and time, because it's a slap in the face to our ancestors. It's a slap in the face to our brothers and sisters who are still suffering the effects, because people will say this, well, man, y'all ain't slaves now, man, that was way back then, because they're trying to get us to forget our history. Listen to me. But no other individuals who were ever persecuted in the history of this planet are asked to forget their history of whatever persecution that they suffered, other than black people. The Jews are not asked to forget the Holocaust. But black people are asked to forget about slavery. So just as it was a horrible time for Jewish people to go through what they went through at the hands of Adolf Hitler in Germany, that was an atrocious act. No one can deny that. But our plight was atrocious as well, with hundreds and hundreds of millions of people lost. So at the end of the day, slavery was a choice. But black people ain't the one who chose it. It was chosen for us. So in that regard, yeah, it was a choice. We just wasn't the ones doing the choosing. But don't ever let anybody come along and make it seem like it was just easy to just get up and just walk away back in those times. Were there slave revolts? Yeah, absolutely there were slave revolts. Nat Turner, that was a slave revolt. He went out and started chopping off heads. Harriet Tubman in the Underground Railroad, that was a slave revolt. She made a conscious decision to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to lead my people to freedom. But you're speaking about a handful of individuals in comparison to the whole. And that fear that was instilled in black people, because you would witness your brother or your father or your sister being whipped, being hanged, being tortured. These are the things that were done to us. And the fear was instilled in us. And over time, the connection of who we really were and our true history and where we come from, the tribes and the different countries, that was lost. So now we carry the names of the slave masters that owned us. We've lost that connection. So here we are as black people in 2018 feeling like, okay, well, we all Americans and everybody loves each other and everybody loves us. No, sir. No, ma'am. That's not true. You're living in a fantasy world. You're living in a fantasy world. That's not true. Kanye is speaking from his reality because he's a multi-millionaire who's famous, and he's looking at it as if, well, you know, everybody should be able to get down the way I get down. Look, first of all, you don't even understand the level of still being the nigga that you own in the eyes of America, in a racist society that we live in. Let's just be real. So, you know, anything I'm saying to y'all today, if you're taking offense to it, then you don't understand history. So I personally don't even care. But if you are a free thinker, like, you know, Kanye advises everyone to be, yeah, then you will have an open mind to, at least if you're disagreeing with me on the surface, go back and research everything that I've said, from the process of mental conditioning all the way to any physical torture that was carried out against black people way back then. The Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863 by Abraham Lincoln, who did not love black people. So let's stop giving Abe credit for freeing us. It was a business move. We'll get into that on another time. But from 1863 to where we are in 2018, I think it's around 100 and close to 160 years. Y'all do the math. The word emancipation derives from a Latin root that means to free from my hand, but not from my control. So although they let us go, we were still under the control of white America. We were still under the influence, and we still carried out the deeds that were implemented and imposed upon us during our times in physical bondage. So don't get caught up in the mix and thinking that just because time has passed, excuse my landline, don't get caught up in the mix of thinking that just because a few years have passed that everything's equal. We're only around half a century removed from the civil rights movement. And even during the civil rights movement, you're talking about my parents growing up in that era. I'm the first generation out of that era in my family, so this wasn't that long ago. Now you have Donald Trump in office, who's basically, he's trying to re-implement a lot of that stuff on the cool along with his cabinet, but that's another story for another time. But to Kanye apologists, there's a difference between agreeing with a person and being an apologist. And if you agree with somebody, you just agree with them. If you're an apologist, that means no matter what they say or what they do, you find an excuse and a reason to say, oh, well, that's not what, they don't understand him. He's a genius. He thinks differently. Okay. He may be a genius. And I'm not knocking that brother, because I'm speaking as a brother. He is a brother. He is our brother. But When your brother get out of line, he got to be checked. He got to be dealt with, and you got to make sure that your brother don't get on that BS, because he has a lot of influence. So people who may not have the knowledge that this brother has, and I may have, or this sister has, they subscribe to that nonsense. And now you're starting to see it. The views are being split because people are saying, well, he didn't mean it like that, or people are praising him for using it as a branding move. That's the worst of the worst. So that's just my take on it, man. Again, slavery was not a choice made by black people. It was a choice made by white slave masters who chose it for us. And we had no say-so in the matter. And, oh, one more thing before I go. I shouldn't tell y'all this because I'm really setting it up. So when you come back with the black people sold black people into slavery argument, I got one for you real soon. So I'll just hold that to one of these idiots post that on there, because I'll be ready for that one too. But anyway, man, much love. I just wanted to give my take on that. Make sure y'all subscribe to the channel, comment down below, and that's it, man. I ain't gonna even promote myself on this video right here, man. It's your big brother K-Rino. One love, man. Peace.